Okay, again, welcome to the school of NPSC and SSP. And today we will discuss with the Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary, another staff agency. Very important, expected NPSC means again. This Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary, these are two staff agencies again. Okay, they are also considered with the Secretary Assistant. Their main function is the Secretary Assistant. So they are known as staff agency, which means every time they will handle the issues which is concerned with appointments, terminations, or just like handling the files, important files in the government of India. So see, it's a very important topic again. So remember, very similar. Cabinet Secretary, it's an office. Okay, it's an office located in the government of India in New Delhi. Whereas Cabinet Secretary is a person. Cabinet Secretary is a person, an IAS officer. Cabinet Secretary is the senior most, the most skillful IAS officer. Cabinet Secretary is a person. But when I say Cabinet Secretary, it's an office. So firstly, we will see the powers and function of this Cabinet Secretary. After that, we will end up with the Cabinet Secretary today. So these are almost important topic and almost similar, but they are different. One is an office, the other is a person. Cabinet Secretary is the name of an IAS officer. Okay, a person. But Cabinet Secretary is like a Prime Minister office, the staff agency. So let's see what are some of the powers and function which is performed by the Cabinet Secretary. Okay, so please write it down. A Cabinet Secretariat is a staff agency in the Union Cabinet. A Cabinet Secretary is a staff agency to the Union Cabinet. It operates under the directions and control of the Prime Minister. Yes, the Cabinet Secretariat operates under the direction and control of the Prime Minister. And this office came into existence in the year 1947, like the Prime Minister office. The Cabinet Secretariat is an office which was set up in the year 1947, and here you have to work under direction. The Cabinet Secretariat is directly under the control and directions of the Prime Minister of India. So let's see. Politically, the Cabinet Secretariat is headed by the Prime Minister. Politically, the Cabinet Secretariat is headed by the Prime Minister, and administratively, it is headed by the Cabinet Secretary, which is the name of a person, which I will discuss in the next topic. Alright, so politically, the Cabinet Secretariat is headed by the Prime Minister, administratively by the Cabinet Secretary. So let's see the powers and function. The powers and function which is performed by the Cabinet Secretary. Number one, it handles the work relating to appointments, resignations of cabinet ministers, allocations of portfolios to the ministers, etc. First, powers and functions of the Cabinet Secretary is it handles the work related to the appointments of a minister, resignation of minister, allocation of portfolios. We all know, right after Modi became the Prime Minister, he will distribute the portfolios, right? He will give, you are going to hold this minister, you are going to hold these ministers and all. So all these, the appointments, the resignations, the allocations of portfolios is handled by the Cabinet Secretary, which means it is a staff agency handling the files and all, right? So you are known as a staff agency. So it handles the work relating to appointments, resignations, allocation of portfolios among the ministers of the central government. Number two, it functions as a chief coordinating agency in the central government. It functions as a chief coordinating agency. Too important, yes. It functions as the chief coordinating agency in the central government. Yes. See, we all know the government of India is a very big ministry, right? So many departments are there. So in the government of India, we all know it's natural that conflicts is going to occur. We all know in the department, in the government of India, in the central secretariat, the conflicts is going to occur. So the Cabinet Secretary will try to resolve it through negotiation, peaceful means. So one of the most important powers, the cabinet secretary will will act as a chief coordinating agency, which means if there is any conflicts in the central government, it will solve it. Next important power. All right. And the third is it watches the implementations of the cabinet decisions by the concerned ministries, department, and other executive agency. Too important. It watches the implementations of the various policies and programs by cabinet ministries and by various executive agencies. What is this? We all know the ministers in the parliament, right? They will make laws. So this law has to be implemented in the field work. So all these are handled by the cabinet secretary. That means the cabinet secretary has to ensure that the law which is made by the government of India has been implemented at the right time, in the right place, for the right people. See, it watches the implementations of various schemes and programs of the central ministries and department and other executive agencies. That's all. You have to ensure that the policy which is made by the ministers is implemented at the right time by the concerned ministries and departments. Next point. It prepares the agenda for meetings of the cabinet and provides necessary information and material for its deliberation. It provides agenda. It provides agenda for meetings of the cabinet and provides necessary information and material for its deliberation. Yes. Why should the ministers come and have a meeting, right? So there should be an agenda. We all know. Why do we have meetings? There is an agenda. So all this agenda is being proposed and made by the cabinet secretary so that the ministers can discuss together and take the decisions. So see, it prepares the agenda for meetings of the cabinet and provides necessary information and material for its deliberation. Yes, the ministries coming to the meetings, they need some information for what to discuss. They can discuss together and they will implement it. Alright, and next is, firstly, it prepares the agenda. Now, see, second point. It keeps a record of the deliberations and discussions of the cabinet meetings and circulate to the concerned ministry. Too important. Now the agenda has been discussed. So, now who will circulate? Who will circulate? Who will keep the record and circulate? It keeps a record of the decisions and discussions of the cabinet and circulate among all the ministries and departments. Yes. First point is all about you prepare the agenda, the cabinet has discussed it. Now who will just like keep the record and circulate all the departments and all? It is the cabinet secretary who keeps the records of all the decisions of the cabinet meetings, and it will also circulate to all the departments. Okay, so these are the functions done by the cabinet secretary. So two important. Firstly, it provides the agenda for meetings of the cabinet. Whatever has been discussed, this has to reach the concerned ministries and department through the cabinet secretary, which shows that it's a very important staff agency. You provide the agenda for meetings of the cabinet and you keep the record of the meetings of the cabinet, circulate whatever has been discussed in the cabinet meeting to the concerned ministries and departments. So cabinet secretary is a very important staff agency in this unit, cabinet. Last point. It keeps the president, vice president, and all the central ministers of the main activities of the central government. Yes. Anytime, every time, it is the duties of the cabinet secretary to provide to the president, the vice president, and to all the ministers about the main activities of the central government. The ministry have to know that whatever has been going on, the ministers or the vice president, the president, and all the cabinet ministers, the prime minister should know whatever is happening in the central department. So it is the duty of the cabinet secretary anytime, every time to inform about the president, the vice president, and all the cabinet minister regarding the main activities of what is going on in the government of India. So these are all the powers and functions which is done by the cabinet secretary. So by the end of this, you can know that it's a staff agency. For what reason? To provide information for discussion, and whatever you have discussed, they will keep it in record, and they will also circulate to the concerned ministries. And if there is any internal conflicts in the central department, it is the cabinet secretary who will try to settle the issues through peaceful means. Okay, take the example, the home minister is having a conflict with the defense minister over an issue. Might be over some arms and ammunition issue. Okay, the cabinet secretary will call the prime minister, and both of them will try to settle the issue through peaceful manner. That is how the government is carried out. Or else we will have a failure, right? The government is never going to work out. So only through negotiation, peaceful means. That is how you come to conclusions. That is how you come to conclusions. Very much important from the NPSC point of view. Okay, this is short bias. And nextly, we will discuss one more point. That is the now we have discussed the cabinet secretary. Now we will discuss the cabinet secretary. Now they're almost similar, but cabinet secretary is the name of a person. Okay, senior most IAS officer. So let's see what are these powers and functions. What are these powers and functions? Okay, let's see what is the powers and functions of the cabinet secretary. Very much important. Now, cabinet secretary, to be a cabinet secretary, you have to rank UPSC as well as you have to be in the top merit list. Okay, if you are in the top number 1 UPSC merit list as an IAS officer, who knows, one day you might become the cabinet secretary. Which shows that cabinet secretary is an IAS officer, the most skillful and experienced and the senior most IAS officer can be appointed by the government of India. So let's see the powers and function of this person. Please write it down. The office of the cabinet secretary was created in the year 1950 after India got independent. 1950, but the year is 1950, not 1947. The office of the cabinet secretary came into existence in the year 1950. The cabinet secretary is the administrative head of the cabinet secretary. See, they are interconnected, right? What did I discuss now? Almost together. See, a cabinet secretary is the administrative head of the cabinet secretariat. Politically, prime minister heads the cabinet secretariat, but administratively, the cabinet secretariat is headed by the cabinet secretary. Now let's see the powers and functions. Almost similar with the cabinet secretary. Remember, it's public administration is very easy. If you have a clear thought on this, it's very easy, and you can attempt all the questions. Okay. What more you can expect in public administration? It's very easy. So now, just know the basic concept and try to come to conclusions. In this, it will give you just like losing a job is losing income or social status. See, good governance. Highlight some points on the good governance in the state of Nagaland. Good governance. See, you will never find this in any book. But by knowing public administration, you can interconnect. Directly, no, not possible. Directly, you cannot memorize all this. So it's very important from the NPSC point of view. Today, please try to focus out here. Okay, so let's see. Now, number 1, the powers and function. The cabinet secretary is the chief coordinator of the central administration. Chief coordinator, yes. Cabinet secretary, as a person, as a senior most IAS officer, he has to ensure that so many departments are there, right? So his main job is to ensure that every department in the Central Secretariat functions smoothly, so that there will be a success in the government of India. The government of India will make so many policies and schemes and projects, but he has to ensure that there is harmony, peaceful interrelationship between the department. Or else, if a department is trying to challenge the other department, I don't think we will have a very bright future. And that particular department and the government of India in general will never move forward. Chief coordinating agencies. See, the cabinet secretary, the first power is he acts as the chief coordinating agency in the Central Secretariat. Number 2. The cabinet secretary acts as a buffer between the politicians and the civil servant. Buffer. Politicians and civil servant. Alright. The cabinet secretary acts as a buffer between the politicians and the civil servant. So what is this? A buffer means, we all know in democracy, the ministers are more powerful, right? The ministers are elected for 5 years, so they represent the real power of the people. That shows that the ministers are more powerful than the IAS officer, the civil servant. So there is a conflict. So every time, buffer means he will try to act as a safe zone, as a peacemaker. Okay, between the politicians and the civil servant. And at the end of the day, he will protect the civil servant, not the politicians, because he is also a cabinet. He is also a civil servant at the end of the day. So we all know an IAS officer will fight with the ministers of the central government. Obviously, there will be a fight going on. But remember, it is the cabinet secretary who will try to settle the issues through peaceful manner. So and every time he will protect the civil servant because he is like a father figure. See the next point. He acts as an advisor and conscience keeper of all the civil servants in India. He acts as an advisor and conscience keeper of all the civil servants in India. What is this conscience keeper? Conscience keeper means like a father. Okay, he will try to protect the interests of all the people in general. The civil servant. We all know the civil servants have so many pressures, right? From the ministers, from the public, everywhere he gets scolding. So every time the cabinet secretary will try to settle all these issues through peaceful manner. That means he acts as a conscience keeper, means he will act as a father figure. Okay, I'm here to protect you, all of you. You can work smoothly, no pressure. You don't have to face any kind of harassment. No, I'm there. I will protect you whenever there is a threat to your service. I'm here to protect you like a father. So 2 important. Next is the chief secretary, the cabinet secretary, acts as a chief advisor to the prime minister on all aspects of administrations and important policy. Yes, the cabinet secretary is the chief advisor to the prime minister on all important issues. 2 important. Modi, our prime minister Narendra Modi, will every time consult the cabinet secretary before he makes very important decisions, because at the end of the day, the cabinet secretary is an IAS officer. Almost he knows everything. He's skillful, experienced, intellectual, qualified. So every time the prime minister will consult the cabinet secretary on all important issues before he makes decisions. So he is a chief advisor every time. 2 important, the most important person in the government of India as a civil servant. Next, he also acts as a link between the Prime Minister's office and various administrative agencies. He also acts as a link between the Prime Minister's office and various administrative agencies, and also between the politicians and the civil servant. Yes. The Prime Minister's office and all the administrative offices in the government of India, there should be one person who will have as a link, right? As a bridge or as an informer. We have to work together. So who is that person? The cabinet secretary. He will every time inform about the Prime Minister's office, administrative agency, everywhere. He will inform every time, anytime. because they have to work together. And between the politicians and the civil servant, yes, every time the cabinet secretary will inform the ministers about the important decisions. Again, he will try to meet the civil servant. They have to work together because in democracy, we have to work together, the politicians and the civil servant. If India is to move forward, the politicians and the civil servant have to work together. They have to work day and night for the betterment of the country in general. This is too important. So see, to be a bureaucrat or to be a minister is not an easy job. So that's the reason he is the cabinet secretary who will every time encourage, okay, let's have a good relationship with the politicians as well as with the civil servant. One of us have to work together for the people. Or else, if I develop some ego, you have some practice, I have an ego, we will not. We will all fall together and the country will never go forward. That's the reason he will every time act as a link, a bridge between the Prime Minister Office, administrative agency, as well as between the politicians and the civil servant in general. Next point. He presides over the conference of the chief. He presides over the conference of the chief secretary, which is held annually. Yes, chief secretary of all the Indian states will have to be together once in a year. So it is the cabinet secretary who presides over this meeting because all the chief secretaries are IAS officer. Okay, so he himself is an IAS officer and he is the head. Above the chief secretary, we will have the cabinet secretary in the government of India. So whenever there is a chief secretary conference held once a year, it is the cabinet secretary who presides over its meeting again. So he will influence all the decision making out there also. So he's like a boss. Next is he is the chairman of the senior selection board. He is the chairman of the senior selection board, which selects officers for the post of joint secretary in the central secretariat. Yes, he is the chairman of the senior selection board. What is this? Above the rank of joint secretary. You see? Joint secretary, additional secretary, secretary. All this from joint secretary, it's a very high rank officer. Alright, so above the rank of joint secretary, additional secretary, secretary, to appoint this kind of a person in the central department, there should be one selection board, right? Senior selection board. And who is the chairman? Again, it's the cabinet secretary. So he has control over all the Indian administration. In short, the cabinet secretary is the head of all this senior selection board, which selects officer to the post of joint secretary, additional secretary, and secretary. That's all. That's all. So he's like a boss. He is the chairman of the senior selection board. He is the conscience keeper of all the civil servants in India. He is the chief advisor of the prime minister on all important issues. He acts as a link between the politicians and the civil servant, the prime minister office, the administrative agency, and he is the chief coordinating agency. Every time he will try to solve the issues through peaceful means. So see, there is no work which is outside the control of the cabinet secretary. In short, if I were to select two important offices in India, it's the Prime Minister office and the Cabinet Secretary. Okay, Cabinet Secretary and the Cabinet Secretary and the Prime Minister office. These three offices are the most important and the most powerful office in the government of India. So remember, whenever you write for 10 marks, 15 marks, or might be asked Cabinet Secretary 20 marks, the role of a Cabinet Secretary in a democracy like India, in the central administration. 10 marks. You can give this point at least. You will try to give at least 6 points and write short note on the cabinet secretary. What is this? It's a staff agency. At the end of the day, they are just to give advice and advisory body. Alright, so from the NPSC mains point of view, these are some of the easiest points where you get almost 4 marks. If they ask for 10 marks, 8 marks, then you might get, if you go for exceptional writing, 8 marks is possible. 8 out of 10. We'll end up with this one today. Alright, so today we have discussed two offices, the cabinet secretary and the cabinet secretariat. Two offices. One is cabinet secretary, the other is cabinet secretariat. Two offices. Alright, so this is too important. This is too important from the NPSC point of view. From the NPSC point of view. From the NPSC point of view. So it's a very important one. We all know you are here to practice the toughest examination. We all know this is a festive season. Christmas is over. This is we are waiting for the New Year, but you have to go for 10-hour study because we all know we have just 60 days, right? Just 60 days, hardly 60 days. So we all know it's gonna be interesting, but very much possible. Very much possible. If you are somehow good in public administration, social issues, current affairs, and writing skills, the English, here it makes it for anyone's game. Because see, history, Nagaland, politics, or just like any other thing, everyone will almost score the same science and all, okay? But current affairs, social issues, public administration, and your general English, this will decide whether you get a job or not, or whether you top the exam or not, or whether you break the exam or not. So two important: social issues connected with public administration, current affairs, and general English. These are the 4 things you have to master now. 2 weeks, 2 months, right? 2 months, these 4 issues. Okay, 4 issues. After that, you write at least 2 hours every alternate days. Every 2 days, go for at least 2 hours practice of skill writing. Okay, English answering. So this will make you crack this exam. Remember, you make an essay. So many essay topic you try to make it. Take the example. The best advantage of writing or compiling an essay is that suppose if I ask you Israel-Palestine conflict, if you make an essay on the Israel-Palestine conflict, it might not come for 50 marks, but who knows? It might come for 5-10 marks in the long answer. So which is a very benefit for you. So many people feel like, why should I make so many essays? But no, it will help you. So this is how NPSC will work, and this is how God will, the Almighty God is there to help you at the end of the day. So best of luck, and we'll see you.